Hey guys, it's Eric here. Wanting to cover doing a air spring seal change on the loop trail. Also going to show you a few little tricks for the stage fork as well. These instructions can also work for the loop SL. First thing you want to do is I've got the loop trail here. So with the ramp control, go ahead and turn that all the way off. So you're turning it all the way counterclockwise until you feel it stop. And then with the air release valve in the center, go ahead and release all the air out of the fork. With all the air released out of the fork, take the dust cover off and release any air that's trapped into the air rod from the bottom of the fork. With all the air released, take your 10mm wrench and go ahead and remove the Schrader valve from the bottom of the fork. With the Schrader valve removed, you want to go ahead and remove these O-rings. Set those aside or toss them away if they're damaged in any way. Since you are working on the air spring side, it is a good idea to go ahead and toss these O-rings. With those O-rings removed, take the Schrader valve dust cover, thread it back on into place, and then rethread it into the air spring rod so you have about 5mm worth of the thread showing. Take a rubber mallet and release the rod from the bottom of the fork. Remove the Schrader valve from the fork. Then take your 1.5mm Allen and remove the external rebound knob. With the external rebound knob, go ahead and grab your rebound removal tool. Install that onto the rebound bolt. There's a little detent there for you to line up that. Then take a 10mm wrench and remove the rebound bolt. Once you feel that the bolt is released from the internal needle, go ahead and just thread that all the way out and set it aside. Take your Schrader valve again, thread it into the damper bolt there, again leaving about 5mm worth of thread showing, and release that rod from the bottom of the fork. Remove your Schrader valve, set that aside, then go ahead and slide the upper assembly off of the lower assembly. Since you're working with the upper assembly, set the lower assembly off to the side. You may want to hang it over some sort of bin so that any excess oil can go ahead and drain out. Go ahead and check that all the air has been released from the air spring side. Don't want any surprises of the air spring wanting to pop out on you. And with the loop trail and the loop SL, you want a set of snap ring pliers. Go ahead and remove that snap ring. Set it off to the side. And then a trick I like to use is take that Schrader valve, thread it in a couple of threads in the end of the air spring rod, and just pull it out the top. Set the upper assembly aside. This is where I'm going to show you with the stage fork. Once you have the lowers off, you have this bottom out peg, and you want to remove that by pressing firmly until it unsnaps from the bottom. Set it aside, and then using a flat blade screwdriver, go ahead and remove its snap ring from the bottom. Set that aside and pull out the air spring assembly. Now back to the loop trail. Remove that Schrader valve from the bottom. Slide off the top out peg, and then slide off the seal head, and give the seal head a good wipe down, cleaning off any grease or possible debris. It's doubtful that any dirt has made it this far into the fork, but you know, in riding anything can happen. First thing you want to do is take your pick, and on the ID of the seal head here, there are 2 seals. I'm going to go ahead and pop both of those seals out. Toss those away. Grab 2 new seals, and by slightly pinching them, they usually curve over so that you can easily insert them back into the groove. The lower seal, if you're having trouble getting that one installed, a neat little trick is to actually take the air spring rod and use it as a stop so that it guides that O-ring down into place. With both of those in place, go ahead and remove the exterior O-ring on the seal head. Toss that one. Inspect for any debris that may have made it to this point. Give it a little wipe down. Throw it across the floor. And then go ahead and install the new seal. At this point, it's a good idea to inspect the top out bumper. If the top out bumper has been damaged in any way, this usually happens if a customer runs high air pressure and runs a really fast rebound that can damage this top out bumper slightly. This bumper, it just pops right off by squeezing it and then pulling it off. This one's in good shape, so we'll just go ahead and put that back into place. With everything looking good, go ahead and inspect the rod. Make sure there's no scratches or debris on this rod. You don't want anything causing any air leaks with a brand new set of air seals. What I do at this point is take your Slick Honey and with some sort of Q-tip, go ahead and put a little bit of Slick Honey onto that Q-tip and then rub it around on those interior O-rings. You just need a nice light thin coat. You don't need to be too excessive. And then go ahead and reinstall this onto the air spring rod. Gently slide it past the end of the rod, making sure that you have the top out bumper facing the end of the rod where the Schrader valve threads into place. Slide that up to the other top out bumper. Next step is to put on a new main air piston seal. Take your pick, just pry that off, throw that one away. Clean up the seal head, the air piston. And then there are 3 little set screws on this air piston. You don't need to pull this air piston off because the check valve assembly generally does not have any moving seals, and so you don't need to replace those seals on it. But it is a good idea with enough ride time to just go ahead and inspect and make sure that these 3 little set screws are nice and snug. You don't want to reef on them and make them nice and tight. That may ovalize the piston itself and cause air leaks. So just, you know, with the small end of your 1.5 millimeter Allen, just make sure those are nice and snug. Take your new air spring seal, reinstall that, and just give everything a good look down. We give you a nice accessory of extra O-rings just in case you need to replace some O-ring or possible top-out bumper that's damaged. With all those seals replaced, go ahead and take the stanchion assembly, inspect the inside of the stanchion, make sure there's no debris or scratches or anything that might cause any air leaks. Take your slick honey and put a good amount on the ID of the stanchion and just rub that around so you get a nice light coating on the inside of the stanchion. At this point, I like to add just about 2 drops of fork oil, just for extra lubrication on the air spring assembly. Take your air spring assembly and gently insert, and as you insert it, you're going to notice it builds up a little bit of pressure. Go ahead and press the air release valve at the top. That way you can get this air spring assembly installed easily. With the assembly all installed properly, go ahead and take that top out plug, insert it in, snap ring, make sure you have the sharp edge. There's a rounded edge and a sharp edge. Make sure the sharp edge is facing away from the stanchion. That way you're getting maximum grab on the groove for the snap ring. Using your snap ring pliers, go ahead, snap that into place. It's a good idea to just give the snap ring a little spin, make sure it's all seated in there properly. With the stage fork, when you reinstall the air spring assembly, the snap ring easily snaps into place just by hand. And then you want to take that bottom out peg and just press it down into place until you hear it snap into place. Now go ahead and grab your upper assembly. If you've already replaced the wiper seals, then everything's good and clean, but if you're just doing an air seal replace and the wiper seals are fine, make sure there is no dirt or debris that gets down into the fork. What I like to do is lay the lower assembly on a nice flat surface, take the upper assembly and insert it into the wiper seals, and just kind of with some mild pressure, wiggling it up and down, slide it in through the wiper seals, making sure you're not damaging the wiper seals. At this point, go ahead and add 10 cc's of fork oil for semi-bath fluid in the lowers on the damper side, and 20 cc's on the air spring side. At that point, go ahead and push the upper assembly until both rods touch the end of the fork. Take the corner of one of your rags, twist it and insert it into the damper side. That way we're wicking away any extra oil that has made its way into the damper rod. If you have any extra oil in the end of the damper rod, it can make reinstallation of the damper bolt a little difficult. With that in place, grab your damper bolt with the rebound removal knob still installed. Inspect these O-rings. If they're damaged in any way, go ahead and replace them. If they're not, then they should be good to use. Thread that into the damper side of the fork and just lightly thread that in until you feel that the needle on the damper bolt touch the internal needle inside the damper. At that point, go ahead tighten the damper bolt into place while holding the rebound removal knob so that you don't bind up the internal rebound needle. Once you feel the damper bolt stop, go ahead and tighten that down nice and snug, or if you're using a torque wrench, go ahead and tighten that to 8 Newton meters. At this point, it's a good time to reset the rebound to the stock setting. Take the rebound all the way to the closed position and back it out 2 full revolutions. With your 1.5 millimeter Allen, go ahead and remove the rebound removal knob and reinstall the external rebound adjustment bolt, or cap, sorry. Next step, go ahead and remove the dust cap off of the Schrader valve and install the new O-rings onto the Schrader valve. With those installed, go ahead and on the air spring leg, thread the Schrader valve into place. Take your 10 millimeter wrench and tighten that down until you feel it stop, and then give it nice snug pressure, or 8 Newton meters as well. At this point, you're good to go ahead and air up the fork. First thing you want to do with the Equal Air system is air it up to about 50 psi. With the fork at 50 psi, go ahead and pull the assembly to full extension. That way it balances both chambers. And then at this point, go ahead and air up the fork to your desired running pressure. Most starting pressures are about 80 psi. Once you have the fork up to running pressure, go ahead and give it one last check. Make sure that the air pressure stayed put, and you can air it back up if you need to. Remove the shock pump, reinstall the dust cover onto the Schrader valve, and then reinstall onto your bike.